Triton, 7. What's that, from a fairy tale? The director's condescending voice filled the control room. Minutes later, 8,000 feet below in the crushing dark, that fairy tale was the only thing standing between a decorated diver and a watery grave. The air in the submersible bay of the research vessel Odyssey was thick with the metallic tang of ozone and chilled coolant. It was a place of loud noises and louder personalities, a world of grizzled engineers and veteran divers who wore their experience like armor. And then there was Maya Lyra. She moved through the chaos with a quiet economy of motion that made her seem almost invisible. At 28, she possessed a stillness that was unsettling to the boisterous crew. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, practical knot, and her gray jumpsuit was immaculate, a stark contrast to the grease-stained gear of her colleagues. She wasn't one of them, and they let her know it in 1,000 subtle ways, the conversations that would halt when she approached, the shared smirks over a technical manual, the way they always called her Lyra instead of by her first name. She was the daughter of the late Dr. Alastair Lyra, a titan of oceanography whose name had opened the door for her position on the Odyssey. To the crew, it was a door she hadn't earned. They didn't see the thousands of hours she'd spent in simulators, or the years of private tutelage under her father, learning the sea not from textbooks, but from feeling its currents and listening to its pressures in experimental submersibles he'd built himself. They only saw a legacy, a ghost who had taken the seat of a more deserving diver. The tension crystallized in the pre-dive mission briefing. The control room was a hemisphere of glowing screens overlooking the moon pool, where two Triton-class submersibles, the Titan and the Triton, 7, floated like dormant sea creatures. Maya stood at the back, her gaze fixed on the sonar projections of the mid-Atlantic ridge. Director Eva Rostova, a formidable woman with a severe silver bob and a reputation forged in the unforgiving world of Soviet-era ocean science, was conducting the briefing. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the low hum of the servers. She valued data, protocol, and predictability above all else. Maya, with her rumored, instinctive, piloting, represented none of those things. Rostova's sharp eyes scanned the roster on the main screen. Pilots for today's geological survey are Marcus Thorne in the Titan, she announced. Thorne, a broad-shouldered man with a confident swagger, gave a slight nod. He was the Odyssey's ace, with more logged deep-sea hours than anyone on board. He glanced back at Maya, a flicker of disdain in his eyes. And Maya Lyra in the, Rostova paused, her lips curling into a tight, humorless smile. Triton, 7. She let the name hang in the air. Triton. What is that, Lyra? A character from a fairy tale? A ripple of sycophantic laughter spread through the control room. It was a calculated jab, designed to remind Maya of her place, an outsider, a child playing with serious equipment. Thorne chuckled audibly. Probably thinks she's some kind of sea goddess, director. The dismissal was a physical weight. Maya felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she held her ground. Her expression remained a placid mask. She simply met Rostova's gaze across the room and replied, her voice steady and clear, "It's the designation for the 7th submersible in its class, Director. Protocol Triton, Sortie 7. Rostova's smile vanished, replaced by an icy glare. Protocol. See that you remember that word, Lyra. The deep doesn't reward fairy tales. It punishes mistakes." Without another word, Maya turned and walked out of the control room, her back straight, every head following her. As she descended the gantry to her submersible, she heard one of the engineers mutter to another, "She's going to get swallowed by the dark down there." She sealed the hatch of the Triton, 7, the world of sneers and doubts locking away behind a circle of reinforced steel. As the crane lowered her into the deep blue of the moon pool, she was finally alone. Here, in the crushing silence of the abyss, the only judgment that mattered was the oceans. And it was coming. The world outside Maya's viewport dissolved from the turbulent blue of the moon pool into a profound, liquid black. At 8,000 feet, sunlight was a forgotten memory. This was the midnight zone, a realm of immense pressure and alien life. The only light came from the Triton 7's powerful external beams, cutting cones of white through the darkness, illuminating ghostly particles of marine snow in a never-ending downward drift. For the first hour, the mission was a study in precision. Maya and Marcus Thorne, in their respective submersibles, moved in a coordinated dance along the ridge. They were tasked with deploying seismic sensors, and Maya's handling of the Triton 7 was flawless. She used the manipulator arms with the delicate touch of a surgeon, placing each sensor onto the volcanic rock with micrometer accuracy. Her movements were fluid, efficient, almost serene. In the control room, the data streaming from her submersible painted a picture of perfect adherence to the mission plan, a fact that only seemed to irritate Director Rostova further. "Thorne, your placement on Sensor 3 was 1.4 centimeters off target," Rostova's voice crackled through the comms. "Lyra, your placement was perfect. Try to keep up, Thorne." The compliment was a weapon, designed to pit them against each other. "Copy, Director." Dealing with a bit of a cross-current here, Thorne replied, his voice tight with annoyance. Maya said nothing, her focus entirely on the abyssal landscape before her. It was beautiful in its desolation. A translucent squid with glowing photophores drifted past her viewport, a living constellation in the dark. She felt a familiar calm settle over her, the feeling her father had called deep synchronicity, a state where the machine, the pilot, and the ocean felt like a single entity. Then, at 14:22 ship time, chaos erupted. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. A low-frequency vibration shuddered through the Triton 7's hull, a deep, violent tremor that was not on any geological forecast. The entire submersible bucked hard, throwing Maya against her restraints. On her screen, the sonar display went haywire as the seabed itself seemed to shift. Seismic event. Unpredicted, the chief geologist shouted over the comms from the control room. "All units, report. Triton 7 is stable," Maya reported, her hands already flying across the controls, steadying her vessel. "Minor G-spike, all systems green." But Thorne wasn't so lucky. "Mayday! Mayday!" His voice, usually so confident, was now a strained gasp. "I've got a collision. Dodging a rockslide and, oh God." A sickening crunch echoed through the comms, followed by the high-pitched shriek of tortured metal. "Titan is hit!" Thorne yelled. "I've lost main power. Multiple hull breach warnings. I'm going down." Maya immediately angled her cameras toward his position. The Titan's lights were flickering erratically, illuminating a gash in its side where it had scraped against a newly exposed spire of obsidian-like rock. Bubbles streamed from the wound. It was sinking, not drifting, but falling, being pulled into the crushing blackness of the trench below. "Thorne, what's your status?" Rostova's voice was sharp, demanding. "Life support is on emergency battery, countdown shows 30 minutes. But my depth. I'm dropping fast. Passing 8,500. 8,600. The pressure will crush this can long before the air runs out." The panic in his voice was raw, undisguised. "I can't stop it. I can't stop it." In the control room, alarms blared. The mission of science had just become a race against death. The ace pilot, the man who mocked her, was now just a terrified voice in a metal coffin, sinking into an abyss from which no one had ever returned. A cold, disciplined panic gripped the control room of the Odyssey. On the main screen, a red icon representing the Titan descended with alarming speed. Every 100 feet it dropped, the hull pressure increased exponentially. Below 10,000 feet, the submersible structural integrity would be a matter of minutes, then seconds. "Launch the Ulysses," Director Rostova commanded, referring to their only deep-sea rescue drone. "Standard rescue protocol, now." The chief engineer, Kenji Tanaka, a man whose face was a permanent mask of worried pragmatism, shook his head grimly. "Director, the Ulysses will take 20 minutes to reach that depth. By then, the Titan will be past crush depth." There's not enough time. The protocol won't work. The unspoken truth hung in the air. Marcus Thorne was already gone. Rostova's face was stone. She would lose a man and $1 billion submersible, but she would not lose another. Her gaze shifted to the green icon on the screen, the Triton 7. Lyra, do you read me? I read you, Director, Maya's voice replied, impossibly calm amidst the chaos. Your orders are as follows: disengage from the area immediately. Return to the surface. That is a direct command. Do not engage. You are to remove yourself from the hazard zone. Acknowledge. The order was brutal, logical, and a death sentence for Thorne. Maya watched the Titan's flickering lights grow smaller, a dying star falling into a black hole. She saw the numbers on her own depth gauge. She saw the panicked, fragmented data stream from Thorne's sub. Then, she closed her eyes for a split second. In that darkness, she didn't hear Rostova. She heard her father. The books and the protocols, Maya, they teach you how to survive the ocean you expect. But the real deep, it's what you do when the unexpected happens. Don't just pilot the machine. Feel the water. Use it. He was showing her schematics for the Triton's thrusters, not the official ones, but his own theoretical models, pushing them to their absolute limits. It was a crazy, dangerous theory he'd called the hydraulic draft. Lyra, acknowledge the command. Rostova's voice was a whip crack. Maya's eyes opened. They were clear and resolved. She analyzed the currents, the Titan's rate of descent, the topography of the abyss below. There was a narrow, stable seerage less than 1,000 feet below Thorne's current position. It was a tiny island of hope in an ocean of death. But he would fall past it in less than 4 minutes. Lyra. Maya's fingers moved over her console, not toward the ascent controls, but to the power distribution panel. She began rerouting auxiliary power to the main thrusters, overriding 3 separate safety limiters. Alarms began to chime softly inside her cockpit. Negative, Director, she said, her voice quiet but absolute. I am engaging. Before anyone in the control room could react, she severed the main voice communication link, leaving only the data stream active. They could see what she was doing, but they could no longer command her to stop. She cut us off. She's defying a direct order, an officer yelled. Rostova stared at the screen, her face a mixture of fury and disbelief. Inside the Triton 7, Maya pushed the main throttle forward. The submersible, designed for graceful maneuverability, groaned in protest. The entire frame vibrated as she forced it into a steep, high-velocity dive, a maneuver far outside its operational parameters. The G-forces pressed her back into her seat as she plummeted into the darkness, chasing the ghost of the falling Titan. She wasn't running from the hazard zone. She was diving headfirst into its heart. What Maya did next was not in any manual. It defied conventional hydrodynamics and broke a dozen operational rules. It was an act of pure, terrifying improvisation. Plunging through the abyss, she pushed the Triton 7 to its absolute structural limit, positioning her vessel not behind or beside the falling Titan, but directly below and slightly ahead of its trajectory. It was the most dangerous place to be, directly in the path of the 30-ton, out-of-control submersible. One miscalculation and they would both be obliterated. In the control room, every crew member stood frozen, their faces bathed in the glow of the screens. They watched the 2 icons on the tactical display merge. What is she doing? Kenji Tanaka whispered, his voice filled with a kind of horrified awe. She's putting herself right under him. It's suicide. Maya's focus narrowed until the world consisted only of her controls and the image on her forward camera. The crippled Titan filled the screen, growing larger and larger, tumbling slowly as it fell. She could see the gash in its side, the dead lights in its cockpit. Thorne, if you can hear me, don't fire your emergency thrusters. Do nothing, she transmitted on the private channel, hoping his comms could still receive. Then, she began. She angled the Triton 7's 4 primary thrusters upwards, diverting nearly 90% of the sub's power to them. She modulated the output of each thruster individually, her fingers dancing across the touchscreen controls. It was less like piloting a machine and more like conducting an orchestra. The result was a powerful, focused, and precisely controlled column of water, an upward current created in the middle of the abyss. It was an invisible hand, a phantom stream pushing up against the Titan's descent. This was her father's theory. The hydraulic draft. The effect was immediate and stunning. The Titan's terrifying rate of fall began to slow. On the tactical display in the control room, the numbers depicting its vertical speed, which had been climbing catastrophically, suddenly stabilized and then began to decrease. "His descent is slowing," the technician breathed, his voice trembling. "It's impossible." It wasn't a tether. It wasn't a connection. It was pure physics, applied with an artist's touch. Maya was using her own vessel's energy to create a cushion of high-pressure water, a localized updraft to fight the crushing gravity of the deep. The strain on the Triton 7 was immense. The hull creaked, and temperature warnings flashed across her console as the thrusters overheated. She ignored them. She held the position, her body tense, her mind locked in a state of supreme concentration. Gently, carefully, she began to maneuver her submersible sideways, and the current she created moved with her. She wasn't just slowing the Titan's fall, she was nudging it, guiding its trajectory toward the sea ridge she had identified. It was a delicate, agonizing process. For 3 minutes that stretched into an eternity, she guided the crippled sub across the dark water. The final 100 feet were the worst, as a cross-current threatened to shear them apart. She compensated, pushing her thrusters into the red, feeling the entire submersible shudder violently. Then, with a gentle bump that was barely visible on camera, the Titan settled onto the narrow, flat expanse of the sea ridge. It came to rest, wounded but stable. At that exact moment, the lights of a Ulysses rescue drone appeared out of the darkness. Maya watched as the drone's manipulator arms attached a tow line to the Titan. Her work was done. She pulled back on the throttle, and the Triton 7's alarms finally went silent. Leaning back in her seat, she took her first full breath in 5 minutes, her body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. On her private comms, she heard a single, choked word from Marcus Thorne. "Thanks." The return to the Odyssey was silent. As the Triton 7 was lifted from the moon pool, no celebratory cheers greeted Maya. The crew on the deck simply stared, their expressions a mixture of shock and confusion, as she emerged from the hatch. She walked past them, her face pale and streaked with sweat, and went directly to the mission control room. She knew what was coming. The atmosphere inside was colder than the abyss she had just left. It felt like a tribunal. Director Rostova stood at the center of the room, her arms crossed, her face an unreadable mask of granite. Chief Engineer Kenji Tanaka stood beside the main screen, where telemetry data from Maya's maneuver was displayed in stark, incriminating detail. Maya sat alone at the long debriefing table. Tanaka cleared his throat, his voice formal and severe. "Maya Lira," he began, not looking at her but at the assembled senior crew. "During the rescue of the submersible Titan, you violated no fewer than 17 established safety protocols. You willfully disobeyed a direct command from the mission director. You pushed your vehicle 40% beyond its rated structural limits and deliberately overrode its core safety systems." He paused, letting the weight of the accusation settle. "By every measure in the book, you should be stripped of your license and permanently banned from deep-sea operations." A murmur of agreement went through some of the older crew members. Protocol was sacred. To defy it was to invite catastrophe. What she had done was reckless, no matter the outcome. Rostova finally turned her gaze on Maya. It was no longer dismissive, it was intensely curious, like a scientist studying an impossible new life form. "You risked 2 vessels. 2 lives. For a theory that has never been tested, a maneuver with a near-zero probability of success. Explain yourself." Maya met her gaze. There was no other option, Director. Protocol would have been a death sentence. The probability of success for the established procedure was 0. I chose a different variable. You chose to gamble. Tanaka interjected. No, a new voice said from the doorway. It was quiet, yet it carried an authority that instantly silenced the entire room. Every head turned. Standing there was a man no one had expected to see. He was older, with a deeply lined face and piercing blue eyes that seemed to have seen every wonder and terror the ocean had to offer. He wore a simple, worn jacket, not a uniform, but his presence commanded more respect than any rank. It was Dr. Eris Thorne, the reclusive, legendary founder of the Institute, the Jacques Cousteau of his generation. He hadn't attended a mission debrief in 15 years. Even Director Rostova seemed taken aback, her rigid posture softening almost imperceptibly. Dr. Thorne walked slowly into the room, his eyes scanning the data on the screen. He didn't seem to be looking at the numbers, but at the sheer audacity they represented. He walked past Rostova, past Tanaka, and stopped directly beside Maya's chair. The silence was absolute. He looked down at Maya, not with judgment, but with a profound, searching intensity. Then, in a gesture no one understood at first, he slowly raised his left hand and laid his fingers flat against the crystal of his old, battered dive watch. It was a vintage piece, a symbol of a lifetime spent under pressure. It wasn't a military salute, it was a silent acknowledgement known only to the old guard of deep-sea explorers. A sign of respect for a fellow survivor who had faced the abyss and returned. He held the gesture for a long moment, a silent communion between the legend and the newcomer. Then, Dr. Thorne lowered his hand and turned to face the rest of the stunned room. For 50 years, he said, his voice raspy with disuse but clear as a bell, we have been writing rules to keep us safe from the deep. Today, someone finally showed us how to fight back. He looked from Rostova to Tanaka. If anyone in this room is more concerned with protocol than with a result like that, you have forgotten why we are out here in the first place. He turned and walked out, leaving a wake of stunned silence. The reckoning was over. And nothing on the Odyssey would ever be the same. The next day, a quiet change had taken place. The official report on the incident was released via the ship-wide network. It didn't list infractions. Instead, it detailed a new, experimental procedure. It was officially designated Emergency Stabilization Procedure, Hydraulic Draft. And beside it, as the originator, was the name, Maya Lira. Her call sign, Triton 7, was no longer a joke, it was now the name of a life-saving technique. The true shift, however, wasn't on paper. It was in the air. When Maya walked from her quarters to the submersible bay for a post-op inspection, something was different. A technician polishing a viewport looked up as she passed, put down his cloth, and simply watched her go. Two engineers stopped their loud debate mid-sentence, turning to follow her with their eyes. The path ahead of her seemed to clear organically. One by one, the crew of the Odyssey stopped what they were doing. They didn't speak. They didn't clap. They just stood, forming a silent, spontaneous corridor of respect. These were the same people who had smirked and whispered, and now they stood in silent tribute. As she reached the gantry, Marcus Thorne was there, leaning against a railing. He wasn't wearing his usual confident smirk. His arm was in a sling, but he stood tall. He caught her eye and gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a simple gesture, but it was an apology, a thank you, and an admission of respect all in one. A figure emerged from the shadows of the command deck. It was Dr. Eris Thorne. He walked toward her, his expression as serene as the calm sea. "Your father," Dr. Thorne said, his voice low so only she could hear. "He always said that the ocean has its own language. He spent his whole life trying to learn it. It seems you were born speaking it fluently." Maya felt a tightness in her throat, the first crack in her composed exterior. For the first time, she felt not like the ghost of her father, but like his successor. He would have liked to have seen this, she managed to say. He saw it, Dr. Thorne replied, a rare, faint smile touching his lips. He saw it in you. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder for a moment, then stepped aside, letting her pass. She stood before the Triton 7. The submersible was scuffed and scarred from its ordeal, but it looked more beautiful to her than ever. On a small digital plaque next to the entry hatch, where the pilot's name was displayed, the crew had made an unauthorized change. It no longer read M. Lyra. It now read, Maya, Legend Lyra. She ran her hand over the cold metal of the hull, feeling the faint vibrations of the ship's engines. The mission was over. The doubts were silenced. The legend had just begun. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, the greatest strength isn't found in following the rules, but in having the courage to write new ones when lives are on the line. Behind every call sign, every title, there is a human spirit. What does this story make you think of? Have you ever been underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Please, let's keep the discussion respectful and positive. Comment with respect. And if you believe stories of courage and quiet strength deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and share this video. We're honored to have you as part of our community.